Hello, I'm Dr. Greg Church. I'm the County Extension Agent for Horticulture in Collin County, Texas, and I would like to give you a presentation on the Rose Rosette Disease. Recently we did a conference on Rose Rosette, and this is the presentation I gave at the conference. So Rose Rosette has been around a while. It was first described in 1941 in California and Wyoming on a native rose. And before that, it was reported on roses in Manitoba, Canada. From the 1960s to the 1990s, it was seen moving through the Midwest and southern states, primarily on the multiflora rose, which was introduced for erosion control, natural fencing, and for wildlife habitat. It was discovered in Texas in the 1990s in Tyler on multiflora rose rootstock and the cut flower farms, and then later was found in the DFW Metroplex in 1998. That was primarily in Tarrant County and Collin County. And in Collin County, it was found on the Spring Creek campus of Collin College. It's reached epidemic proportions in North Texas in recent years, primarily due to the abundance of rose plantings commercially and by homeowners. And I think that's just the amount of roses planted. When you see more roses or any type of plant planted, you're going to increase the likelihood that a disease may move through it. And so many of these plantings are densely populated or densely planted with roses. And so if one rose is infected, it can spread rapidly through that planting. And we've seen that quite often. And in Collin County, there's probably not one area of the county that's really free of this disease. And so it's spread over the last 5 to 6 years quite a bit. And we're hearing reports that it's a problem in other North Texas counties as well. In 2002, there was a survey that was completed, identified counties throughout the country that had confirmed cases of Rose Rosette disease. Here's a larger image of those counties in Texas. They include Grayson, Collin, Tarrant, Palo Pinto, Smith, and Rusk County. And more recently, as of 2014, those counties have expanded. The work by Kevin Ong at the Plant Disease Diagnostic Lab in College Station has confirmed cases in these counties. So that added Parker County, Ellis County, Rockwall County, Denton County, Dallas County to those numbers listed. So Rose Rosette disease is caused by a virus. Before 2011, it was suspected that it was caused by a virus, but until a study was published in 2011 that confirmed that the virus was present in these infected plants, they named the virus Rose Rosette virus. It's a negative sense RNA virus, and it's a member of the Miravirus genus. And in this published research, they successfully developed a method of detection using PCR. So the Rose Rosette virus can become systemic within the plant. So therefore, pruning symptomatic portions of the rose likely will not cure the rose of the virus. It's also been shown that grafting can transmit the virus to other plants. One study showed limited mechanical transmission, and the virus is spread by aerified mite. These are microscopic mites that are present on roses, specifically roses, and they can pick up the virus particle and move it from plant to plant. Now, these microscopic mites don't have wings, so they it's thought that they catch a ride on birds or other insects, or on humans who may be pruning the rose. So this virus is picked up by the mite and transmitted to other roses. And so either through propagation of infected roses or by spread by the mite is how we believe that this virus has spread so rapidly here in North Texas. So it's important to diagnose this disease properly. So we want to observe the symptoms on a particular plant and make sure that they fit those described symptoms. We want to avoid confusing those symptoms with other problems or normal plant growth, such as herbicide damage or chemical damage, or the normal reddening of new leaves. And if we have pruned the rose recently, you may stimulate excess branching that may look like one of the symptoms of rose rosette. And then there's other viruses that infect roses, and we don't want to get confused with those type of symptoms. But nothing is definitive without a laboratory test. And so if you want a definitive answer whether that rose is infected, you can send a sample to the Plant Disease Diagnostic Lab. You can reach them at plantclinic.tamu.edu. So when a specimen plant exhibits multiple symptoms of the Rose Rosette disease, the likelihood that it's infected is very high. Now, we found that a lot of different varieties may exhibit some of the symptoms while others do not. So here's a list of the symptoms. The primary one is witch's broom, and we primarily see this quite often on most varieties. Also, we see excess thorn production, excess lateral shoot growth, excess cane size, leaf proliferation and malformation, red pigmentation or discoloration, and eventually the plant will die. Now, this may take several years to happen, and so while that plant is infected and symptomatic, it can serve as a reservoir for the virus, so it can be spread to other viruses. And so this prolonged dying of the rose is actually a bad thing for us, because as gardeners, if we leave those infected plants, it can actually spread from that. So our recommendation is to remove those infected plants so that they won't allow the virus to be spread to other plants. So here's the published symptoms from the 2011 paper that described the virus. And so we see leaf proliferation at the node on example A. B is red pigmentation of stems and leaves. C is multiple shoots emerging from a single node to form a witch's broom. And then D is malformed leaves. And we don't want to confuse these symptoms with herbicide damage. And so 2,4-D or glyphosate, or other types of herbicides that are applied in the vicinity of these roses, it's good to know the history of the maintenance of that site, so we know if there's a chance that it could just be herbicide damage. So it's important to diagnose it properly. Here's some good photos of excess thorn production. You can see this on some new growth and a new flower bud. You can notice that the sepals on this flower bud are also deformed. And sometimes these excessive thorns are on shoots or stems that are red in color, but they can also occur green as well. So witch's broom, basically that's where you have multiple branching from a single point. In this case, we also see that rosette symptom, which is the shortening of the internodes. internodes is the space on the stem between where the leaves attach. So those are all shortened, and you have this bunched up appearance. You can also see the excess thorns produced on this stem too. Red pigmentation. So, on many varieties, new growth has a red pigmentation to it, and we don't want to get confused with normal growth. So at first glance, you can't say that it's infected. You have to look closely and see that it exhibits other symptoms besides just the red pigmentation. Malformed leaves. And so this is an example of having this serration that occurs on the edges of the leaves, and as actually sepals as well. So this is not normal for this variety, and so it's important to know what's normal for any of these plants, especially for varieties, so that you can compare it to this infected plants and properly diagnose the problem. Here's another example of what you might see with the witch's broom. And if you turn that leaf over, you see that there's also excessive thorns. This may be what you typically see out in the landscape. This is a homeowners association in Fairview, Texas, and they have a lot of roses planted along this street, along this neighborhood, and they have a lot of roses infected with Rose Rosette. And so most of these roses in this planting bed are infected. These are knockout roses, and this photo was actually taken December, and a lot of knockout roses and other roses are kind of semi-evergreen. And so you can see that it has excess thorn production. These have been pruned recently too, so oftentimes landscapers will prune off the symptomatic witch's broom on these plants or other type of symptoms to try to make them look better. And so sometimes our diagnosis can be misleading. And so this is an example of what you might see after pruning that's meant to cover up the symptoms. And see how things may look. There's a close-up photo of it. So you can see the excess thorns, and you can see the sepals are deformed. They're not supposed to look like that. And this is a kind of a wide-angle shot of that planting. It's a courtyard at a church in Allen, Texas. And these roses in the foreground have been planted for almost a decade, and they became infected at some point, probably about 4 years ago. They've been symptomatic that time, and it's an example of why we need to remove roses. So one rose started off infected, and it spread to all these roses. And actually, this property, they've taken out almost 300 roses, so that's a significant economic impact, and we wanted to get a control of this disease so that we can grow roses again safely. And the only way we can do that is to remove these infected plants. This is an example of Rose Rosette in another state, and you can see that witch's broom appearance, deformed leaves, red pigmentation. You'll notice on a lot of these plants that are initially infected, you only see it on one portion of the plant. So we have to be on the lookout for these symptoms on the roses. We want to try to catch them early instead of later. The earlier we catch these symptoms, we'll be able to control the disease better and prevent it from spreading through an entire planting or through an entire neighborhood. Here's a close-up of Belinda's dream that is infected, and the deformed leaves. Some more photos. Here's another variety showing different symptoms, and this is not normal for this variety. And the best explanation here is Rose Rosette. You see deformed leaves, witch's broom, although since these leaves are so small on this particular variety, it's hard to see. And this is an example where you don't see so much the red pigmentation with the witch's broom, but you still see multiple witch's broom throughout this plant. And this is not normal, and the plant is unattractive, and is a good reason to get this out of the landscape and replace it with something better. So this is an example of how Rose Rosette can also affect flower formation. As that disease progresses throughout that plant, it affects the ability of some varieties to open the flower buds, and so you see this occur. So you can see in this case parts of the plant look normal and the symptomatic portions do not. And there's a close-up of that same plant. You can see that there's thorns being produced where they normally should not. The sepals of that flower bud are odd and deformed. Here's a photo of some stems with thorns on it that are not normal, and that's excess thorn production. And that's an example of a Rose Rosette in a potted plant nursery in Florida, which happened to be the first report of Rose Rosette in Florida. And that's in northern Florida. So in the landscape, a lot of people are seeing Rose Rosette, and we need to be able to identify it correctly and see those symptoms and observe them and remove those roses. So you can see red pigmentation is pretty heavy. The excess thorn production on this particular plant is very unique. So control. There's actually no cure for infected plants. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about how we deal with this disease, and so we're trying to provide research-based information that you can rely on. And so there's no cure. Once a plant is infected with a virus, you cannot cure the plant of that virus. And therefore, the infected plants must be removed, including the roots. Because as you know, roses can come back from the roots, and they can potentially be infected. And so we want to remove the roots as well. So removing these infected plants will help prevent the spread of disease. Another misconception is just removing that symptomatic stem. That's not a way to cure the plant. What you'll end up finding is that another portion of the plant will become symptomatic after you remove the symptomatic stem. Since those mites potentially are infesting that rose, they could potentially spread it while that plant is asymptomatic. So we don't know of any resistant rose varieties. So what is the future of roses in North Texas? Well, we want to try to eradicate the Rose Rosette disease, and that requires a community-wide approach. And so we can stop the spread. And we got to work cooperatively and provide the public with education on this disease and how to control it. We need to remove all these roses from our communities so we decrease the chance of reinfecting newly planted roses. And following these research-based recommendations are going to be the most effective approach to combating the disease. We formed recently the Rose Rosette Eradication Alliance. Our goal is to remove these infected roses and encourage the implementation of strategies to control the spread of the disease. It's designed to encourage partnerships between agencies, organizations, businesses, nursery and landscape professionals to create a community-wide response to the disease. The Alliance partners will help create the driving force behind proper Rose Rosette disease management. The Alliance members simply pledge a commitment to managing Rose Rosette disease through research-based recommendations. And the Collin County Extension Office is going to provide a website and resources to support this alliance. Recently, a team of researchers across the country, including researchers at Texas A&M University, were awarded a grant to work on Rose Rosette Disease. They want to study symptoms on different varieties for better diagnosis, identify and develop Rose Rosette Disease resistant plants. They want to develop molecular markers to facilitate rapid introgression of resistance into commercial varieties. So they also want to develop molecular diagnostic tools to help diagnose plants more effectively. They want to create a monitoring network to track the disease and develop best management practices to manage the disease. So hopefully this presentation was informative. Feel free to leave comments in the comment section below. Hopefully you learn more about Rose Rosette disease and you can help us manage it more effectively.